Another great resource for finding music to work with are remix competitions. There are countless remix competitions across the internet. One of the major sites is Beatport. This is more of a dance music site, but many of the alternative bands that I've ever liked had their own remix competitions. The thing with remix competitions is they aren't open all the time. So if Young the Giant or Mute Math had remix competitions back in 2011 or 2014, those stems are only available for that period of time. And stems are complete tracks that feature only particular sounds. So these stems that I have open in Audition are all from a band called Pop Will Eat Itself, and I was sent these directly by the band to do a remix for them. We have basses, so this is all the bass sounds in one 3-minute track. We have the vocals all in one 3-minute track. We have what's called Rob Gits in one 3-minute track, loops, and live drums. These names came from what the band had originally called them. 6 individual waveforms that, when put into a single multi-track, equal the song as we know it. And I'm going to go ahead and throw these all over here. So if I were to do a mix down of these, essentially what I'd end up with is their original track as we know it. When you are working with stems by another artist, they are not royalty free, they are the property of that artist. So it's not the same as making your own music using the royalty free. So it's not the same as getting music. So it's not the same as getting loops or individual sounds from royalty free sites like Splice. However, I think it's an excellent way to learn how to structure a song and how to fit elements together. For example, the bass parts of this song are pretty sparse. There's little bass parts in the verses, larger bass parts in what are the choruses, and then there's a huge chunk here where there's no bass at all. Something from around 1 minute 20 to almost 2 minutes. It's about 30 seconds there. There's no bass. And the bass parts essentially mirror what we've got going on with the guitar parts. You see these little chunks here. And we can see how that mirrors the bass here. Also, what's cool about working with multi-tracks is you can compare what you do with your song to what's considered a professional mixing job, a professional recording, which is the final commercially available track. Now, when you have all these multi-track stems, they're not broken down into loops, so the initial thing that a novice producer might do is just start cutting out certain sections rather than moving them around. There's no markers, there's no loops. Without putting those in, it is really hard to just sort of pick up an area and shift it or completely replace the drums as they are. Unless you start breaking these down into other loops, you're kind of left with volume controls and panning from the right channel to the left channel. And that's not really a good way to do remixing. We want to create something that doesn't just change the volume of the individual parts, but is a new approach, a new structure to the song. So where I'm going to start with is the section that's called loops. I'm going to dive into it by double-clicking it, and I'm going to zoom in on this chunk because I think this chunk looks kind of exciting. I'm going to zoom in really tight on the waveform, and where we have this little section here, you can see this spike. That is where our drum kick starts. I find when you're working with loops, it's the simplest approach to start with the rhythm section because I'm going to put a marker down by hitting M, and then I'm going to play through the track until I feel like I've got a section where the beat has cycled 4 times. Okay. Should be here. Zoom in. where I see that spike start, hit M. Now I will back up to the first marker, highlight a little bit past my other marker. I'm going to copy by going Edit, Copy, or on my Mac, Command C. And then I'm going to paste to new, which is also under the Edit menu. You can also hold down Shift, Command, and V for pasting to new. Now I'll go ahead to the next marker by moving playhead to the next. Highlight the rest by holding Shift and then hit Delete. And voila, I have a loop taken from that. Now that I have this loop, I think I want to have it go a little bit longer than 11 seconds. I actually want to have it go 4 times. So my next step is to highlight the entire track, which I can do either using the mouse or Command A. I'm going to copy it. And then I actually want this to repeat 4 times instead of the single time that I have here. So I'm going to move my playhead over here, and instead of simply just pasting this section, so I have a duplicate, I am going to use Mix Paste. And Mix Paste will pull up this menu. It shows you what your copied audio is, the audio you have on the clipboard, and existing audio, which currently is nothing because the playhead is at the end of this waveform. I'm going to have this box here, Loop Paste, checked, and I'm going to have it looping 3 more times for a total of 4. So it'll be the one that already exists here, and then 3 more new iterations. There we go. Each time it looped, it placed a marker, so it's really easy for me to move to those playheads. And now I have a 45-second version of my original sampled loop. Before I go any further, I think I'm going to save this. You never know when this stuff is going to crash or get corrupted, and certainly when you have a whole bunch of waveforms over here, it's going to get confusing unless you start giving them new names. So this one I am going to be calling Beat Loop Machine. And there it is. Now that I know the length of a single loop, which is 11.295 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and head over to the vocals. I'll find the first vocal area we have here. Okay. Moving my playhead to the start of this vocal. I am once again going to mix paste, but rather than pasting the actual beat onto the vocal, I'm just going to go ahead and take the copied audio down to 0. So what it will be pasting is essentially silence instead of my loop. I'm also not going to have my loop paste 3 times. I just want to get 11.295 seconds worth of audio out of the vocals to create a new vocal loop. Hit OK. See what we've got. Now this song is a little bit unusual because the entire track is not in 4/4 time. It has this verse. We came to fame with that guitar screaming, wall to wall, bass and face to face balling. Where your vice and choice are just fall in line. We came to fame with. And then it cuts out a little section and starts the vocal again. I'm gonna go ahead and copy all of this, paste to new, under edit, and then this little chunk, if I was going to make a remix that kept the same strange time signature as the original track, then by all means I'd probably leave all of this vocal in, but because I think I'm going to make a 4/4 time signature remix, For simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead, zoom in, and rather than deleting this chunk, I'm going to use this option here. This is volume. Even though it says adjust amplitude, essentially it's a volume knob. I'm just going to volume that down to nothing. So I still have a vocal loop. It's still 11.295 in length, but it's going to be missing that little bonus chunk. Let's hear what it sounds like with the beat. Select all, copy it, hop over to my beat loop, going to mix paste it, and because experience has taught me that something that looks as loud as this is probably too loud to mix with something as loud as this, I'm going to see what it sounds like when I mix my copied audio at 80% next to the 100% of this machiny beat loop. Okay, not too bad. We will do some refining, but this stage is literally creating our loops so we can build a structure out of them. I want to touch briefly on working with samples that don't actually have the same BPM, but you want to mix them. So I'm going to open a sample that has a BPM of 90 beats per minute. It sounds like this. And then I'm going to open this sample, which is a drum loop that is 110 beats per minute. So significantly faster than my 90 beats per minute. If I look at the time on the 90 BPM track, 5 seconds and 0.333 is how long this loop is. This one, the 110 BPM track, is 4 seconds 363. So if I want this one to fit alongside this one, I'm going to need to stretch this one. We can locate stretching under effects, time and pitch, and then we have a few choices here. I'm going to go ahead and do stretch and pitch because when you stretch and pitch something, it's going to, by default, lock onto slowing it down all around, as if you slowed down a record player. If you have this unchecked, it's just going to stretch the sound, but it's not going to make the sound go any lower or higher. And we'll go ahead and see what both of those sound like. So first off, I am going to 100% stretch it with stretch and pitched locked. I want my new duration to be 5.333. I'll hit enter, and you'll see that it's going to stretch it 122.21%. And now the pitch of that sound is 122 and some change percent lower. I'll copy this, and I'm going to cut the playhead to the beginning, and I'm going to mix paste. I'm going to mix paste them at 50% of the copied audio and 50% of the existing audio, just because I want to see what an even balance of those two things sounds like. Pretty cool. Let me undo it and let's hear what the original sounds like without my mix. I think mixing the copied audio a little louder and the existing audio a little lower gives me something with a little bit more personality. I like the lower pitch snare of this particular loop. The snare in this loop sounds like it was done on plastic or wood or something. So it's a good mix between the two though. Now, if I want this stretched but I don't want the pitch to lower in any way, I'll go ahead and undo what I've done. Undo pitch and stretch. There's my original. Effects, time and pitch, stretch and pitch. Uncheck this. Make sure that pitch shift is set to 0. Then back up to stretch, make sure that is checked. Hit apply. And it's stretched, but you will notice that there's a little bit of a glitch happening. This is what happens when you pull a waveform apart like that. It's going to try and stretch out what exists there, and it might not sound great. There are ways to cover this up by adding other effects, other sounds like vinyl sounds. Honestly though, I can tell when something is stretched that way and it has this blockiness to the waveform that is really unappealing to my ear. So I'm just letting you know that is something that can happen when you stretch this stuff out and you don't allow the pitch to shift. We'll go ahead and copy this, do our mix paste as before. Yeah, I can really hear in this chunk where this beat is stretched out, and I'm not a big fan of that. However, if you're trying to match a sample that isn't a rhythm sample but something that has like a particular key and you need the key to fit, then stretching without pitch shifting is the strategy that you're most likely going to have to use.